Hello, NFT.NYC community. Happy to bring another awesome conversation with you. Christos, you are a friend of mine. We've done all sorts of fun things together. So this should be a lot of fun just getting an update from you. You've done 150 papers or stories that you've written over the last 3 years. You are double PhD from Stanford. You're the smartest and fastest talking friend I have. So everybody strap in and get ready for a lot of information really quick. Christos, please introduce yourself to us.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Thank you, Ian. Well, it's an honor to join you. Thank you for all the work that you're putting into making NFT.NYC a beautiful success this upcoming year, and excited to be back. I don't know if I'm not a NASCAR driver, so hopefully it's not too fast. But yeah, I guess the genealogy of my journey is that I love building. But while some people like build with their hands, I build with words and behind a computer, and I love writing. I love expressing complex ideas. And so that's what led me this journey to get dual doctorates, one in economics, one in engineering at Stanford University. And while I love the process of research, it can also be sometimes a little bit constraining, because when you're in the research sphere, there is a narrow box that you have to fit in. You go through the peer review process. There is a way that works. You spend years and years working on a paper that goes to an editor, it goes to referees. What happens when the editor decides that crypto is not important or whatever is not important? You have to try another one. And so after going through that process and having published a lot, I felt like entrepreneurship is also something I care a lot about, because it comes down to building. And so at kind of this juncture in my life, I have 5 different academic appointments, one out of Columbia Business School, one out of Stanford, one out of Baylor, Arizona State University, and the University of Nicosia. We're working with them to build out a new master's curriculum around Web3, and taught a class on token economics. But then I also have 2 startups, one of which is Living Opera, and my best friend and co-founder, Sula Parasides, will be at NFT.NYC as well, talking about generative art. My other startup, Dynamic, is a fintech company, and again, focused on democratizing access to different computational techniques for forecasting and for data analysis. So that's a little bit about me. And really my passion is anything that deals with promoting human flourishing, whether that's on the data and creating like SaaS tools, or whether it's writing, or whether it's just having relational exchanges like we are today. So really honored to be a friend of yours, Ian, and to be here today.
Well, it would be great to have you speak again this year. You were brilliant last year. It was great to have you and Sula as you're just getting Living Opera started. Why don't you share with us a bit about what you hope to communicate when you're at NFT.NYC and you're speaking?
Yeah. Well, in my talk, I'm going to be talking about how the stock market has been very elusive for a lot of Americans, and just people in the world in general, is that they're not investing that much. And as a result, you have this bifurcation where certain individuals know how to invest, they have the right financial advisors, and they make returns year after year on passive income. And then there's other people that have felt these barriers to the system. And so I believe that one of the ways that Web3 is going to impact people is by democratizing the financial space. There's 2 ways that this happens. One is that NFT exchanges might become like new stock exchanges. So people trading assets on OpenSea, on Nifty, like Rarible, all these different platforms. And that opens up a new portfolio of assets that people can learn about, trust. Because what happens when your friend tells you, hey, I just launched this, and then you know the friend, you know that they're not lying to you. You don't need to believe a financial report that pick your Fortune 500 company is releasing. You know them. And even if that particular artwork doesn't make it in the next year, you believe in that friend over the next 10 years, the next 20 years. And so I believe that's one avenue for investing. Another avenue is that you, as a content creator, might not be able to buy a BTC or ETH, but you are able to produce your own NFTs. And that allows you to then sell and to get the Ethereum that then allows you to invest in other assets yourself. So there's these two gateways. And so I'm going to be releasing a formal paper that's the usual like 40 pages and it's going to go through the publication process. But in my talk, I'm going to be highlighting kind of the main takeaways about how distributed ledger technologies are going to democratize this space and how it's different than what we saw with Web 1 and Web 2. In the talk that Sula is going to be giving with Living Opera, she's going to be talking about generative art. And I'd love to show sometime in the next 10 minutes, a mini demonstration of one of our collections that we're going to be pioneering and will be coming out over the summer.
There's so much diversity of projects, right? So many innovative ways of using this new technology. What are some of the most creative approaches that you're seeing in the market? Because you get to see so much. You do so much research, you write about it, you tinker on it, other people speak into it, all these different papers you do that have been peer researched. So what are you seeing right now that's really expanding ways of using this tech?
Yeah, well, honestly, a lot of the novel work is coming just from the creators in the space. Ironically, I have a separate paper that is about the delay between when something happens in the real world and when it eventually gets published. And there's like about a decade delay. So in my research, I try to make it as timely as possible. But let me give two examples. One is just recently met Rob Petrozo from Rally at VCon, and the idea of fractionalizing assets, historical assets that people know, understand, that have value. I find that a really alluring concept. And more generally, what we're doing with the Living Opera, and I also met Art d'Egypte, that is taking art exhibitions around the pyramids. And so you take seminal works of history that they're not trying to prove themselves. They're not trying to stay relevant this year, next year. They have stayed relevant for hundreds of years already. And now they're opening up the doors for people to be part of that historic journey. So that's one example. I think another example is around more thinking less about NFTs and thinking more about what is happening with DAOs and how that's opening up modes of collaboration. Because you have to, what is a DAO doing? It's not like some fundamentally novel concept. It's just that there's new ways of coordinating complex tasks and using smart contracts to streamline and automate things where normally human error, ambiguity would arise and would complicate the process. And so this to get more practical about what I mean here is that when employers are trying to figure out how to execute on a task, they have a job description, and you have to be very clear about what skills, knowledge, abilities are needed in order to see that task come to fruition. And so I see in this Web3 space a lot more granularity about what exactly is needed. And as a result, there's matching processes for linking the task with the talent, and then crowdsourcing that so that anyone, you don't necessarily need to have a college education, a graduate degree. I mean, honestly, if you just are persistent and you do a number of tweets, you get active on a Discord channel, you're able just to jump in and to prove yourself. And so I think that is going to have a very democratizing effect on the workplace. Obviously, there's still more educational efforts that are needed, which is exactly why this sort of streaming NFT.NYC is paramount for getting the word out about how to participate in the Web3 economy. But I think it's going to have a very profound effect on the labor market.
Wow, I'm enjoying this. You're so articulate. Talk more about DAOs. Okay, there's a lot of DAOs people have joined. They do a lot of different things. I think people participating in the governance is a big problem. How do you see it being done well? How do you think DAOs can be approached moving forward? Because again, you get access to all these things and you're such a brilliant mind. So give me more insights, Christos.
Well, let me start with a caveat. And I also want to acknowledge that I'm by far not like the best expert on this. It's just that from an outsider's perspective and somebody that's actually trying to launch a DAO, these are issues that I'm starting to grapple with. But first, the caveat. So a lot of people, I think, in this space will use a bunch of buzzwords and look at DAOs or smart contracts as a panacea to fundamental challenges that we as humans just need to grapple with. Because if there's dishonesty in a relationship, no number of smart contracts are going to solve that. If there is not clarity over what is needed to actually see a task through, then a DAO is not going to solve that. So you need clarity, you need trust. But what they are able to do is streamline things. They are able to cut out a lot of intermediaries. The more intermediaries that you have, the more of a game of telephone that you're playing. And also, the more that you have centralized nodes of decision making, the more that there can be a traffic jam that emerges. To the extent that you can crowdsource some of these decisions, you get what's called wisdom of the crowds, where a high sample size is able to converge towards something that's true. So now let me move to an example. One of the ideas that we're trying to pioneer within Living Opera, and let me actually just put a footnote here and say, within Living Opera, co-founded Sula Parasides, Norman Reinhardt. Norman is a world-class tenor. Sula is a world-class dramatic soprano, so opera singer, has been doing this for over a decade. We have a Web3 multimedia company. And so our vision is to bring this fine art and to combine the operatic voice with digital art and help people understand more about some of the timeless composers, artists, and to really bring beauty out at a time when we're looking for things that matter and beautiful things. One of the challenges that we've identified, though, is a lot of emerging artists have a lot of trouble starting off their career. While there's a lot of arts funding, a lot of that goes to centralized institutions that never passes through to the actual artist. And so one of the ideas that we had is, why don't we launch a DAO, we're calling it the Living Arts DAO, that connects philanthropists with the emerging artists. And because we have a deep focus on educational programming, our thought is, what if an artist can issue an NFT of their business proposal saying, I want $1,000, here's what I'm going to use it for, and they put together that proposal. So they're getting training around entrepreneurship, and we have our own masterclass that Norm and Sula have created. So they take that masterclass, they pair it with the business proposal that gets linked to a philanthropist, and then a philanthropist might have a pool of NFTs that they're investing in. So they might front 50K and they invest in a pool of artists. And so then you get this relationship that emerges and a journey that emerges between the philanthropist and the artist. And that cuts out a lot of intermediaries. So that's a use case around how we think we can provide value, because we're going directly to the artist, linking them directly to the philanthropist. We're not trying to take some cut. And it also has a core value add, because now the artist is growing by writing a proposal and they're getting certified in the Living Opera educational arts entrepreneurship program. And we ourselves are actually doing research around arts entrepreneurship. We've got a paper that we're working with a great co-author at University of Michigan, Jonathan. And anyways, that's a whole separate conversation. But we're trying to move forward on this in a practical way, as well as on a research way, and the two to kind of reinforce each other.
You just came back from VCon. You did an article for Forbes this last week about your perspective of VCon, and Gary really enjoyed that. Give me some insights. What'd you see there? What was interesting to you? What was surprising? Yeah. There's a lot of speakers, a lot of different vendors and things like that. So share a bit about that before you wrap up.
Yeah, so grateful to be there. It was, the energy was off the wall, and I think that's actually one of the things that actually differentiates our NFT community from sometimes, say, the Bitcoin community, where people sometimes are really focused on certain crypto assets, but they can be a little bit more short-termy. I think what's beautiful about the NFT community is that there's more of a focus, at least from my vantage point, around the story, the mission, and the overall values of the project. And so I love that. So I learned a lot, met a lot of people, kind of went in not knowing that many people, but came out meeting a lot. And so that one piece in Forbes was about how Gary Vee has had just a really wonderful track record and how he's been able to identify trends in advance. I think one of the areas that we need to definitely be vigilant of in the NFT community is always thinking about what value is the NFT going to bring that Web 2, Web 1 wasn't doing, because we're going to persuade the world about this Web 3 initiative and vision by showing them clear use cases behind the underlying technology. And this is something that Gary emphasizes, that blockchain is just better. Decentralization is just better. So the more that we can focus and making clear what the NFT is allowing that prior technologies are not, the better. Now, in my view, what I say is that NFTs tokenize ideas at their most granular level. What I mean by that is that you look at what does a market need to function. It needs rivalry and exclusivity. when there's non-rivalry or non-exclusivity, think about a public good like national defense. If you and we're both in the United States, and so it's not like the military can say, I'm going to defend Ian, but I'm not going to defend Christos. So these are the concepts behind non-rivalry, non-exclusivity. Now, NFTs are able to tokenize things at an extremely granular level and make it transparent and accountable. So this allows creators to make markets where markets could never previously exist. And so I think as long as we focus on building around how NFTs are able to open up new markets and create value where value was standing on the table and no one was grabbing, it was just going out there. I think that's going to be beneficial for the entire community.
Well, I love the vision. I really have enjoyed the community over the last several years. And I know there's all these peaks and valleys that happen in the extremes of the crypto blockchain world, right? Anything that happens in the markets can be a bit more extreme, higher highs and lower lows. You know, one last thing I want to ask about is voice tech. You and I did our white paper together, gosh, almost 2 years ago on NFTs and voice tech and bringing decentralization together with this interface with our voice. Any thoughts you'd want to share with us on how you see voice technology playing out in the metaverse and in all things Web3, including NFTs, just as you're using Opera to create NFTs?
Well, I have two answers to this. The first is a practical example, and I'm going to do a demonstration of you for everybody watching. But I think the takeaway from this is that combining audio with all the other forms of media that we have is going to create more immersive experiences. And I think the more that we can understand, not just with our mind, but with our hearts, and that was a big journey for me, because I understood the value of the art before 2 years ago, before I became involved in Living Opera, but now I have more of a heart understanding of it. So let me show you, and I'm just going to see. So I show that very short clip of a collection that we're going to do in the summer called Magic Mozart, where people might have a concept around Mozart, but they don't truly know who Mozart is as a human being. And I might even share screen and show you. So this is just an example of one of the NFTs. But what people don't know is that Mozart wrote the most beautiful, funny love letters. And this is just a picture of his wonderful bride, and it's a wonderful example to humanize things that previously people didn't have a connection with. Now, lastly, I don't want to have too long of an answer, but I think, how is voice tech going to change metaverse experiences and the labor market? Voice is something that is less of a barrier. People might have a barrier to coding. They might have a barrier to math. That can all be solved, but I think voice is going to provide a new way of learning, of communicating, and just bonding with one another. I mean, there's a reason why it's better to have a conversation versus why you're not filming a Skype, us just chatting and going back and forth. There's something about the voice that creates and inspires. So I think there's a psychological element, and there's also this experiential component, and that's going to have a chain reaction of beneficial effects.
Well, I love that you did a show and tell. Always good to see the updates from you and Sula and team. Christos, joy to spend time with you. I'll see you in New York, and I look forward to hearing you speak there. And for everybody watching this conversation, thank you for your attention. I'll be back again with another conversation.